Okay, good evening. So, welcome to a collaboration between KILTR.com and Independence Live. And tonight we're going to be joined by the esteemed author of a best-selling book, my favourite book, in fact, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman from 2004. So, John Perkins, welcome to the show. How are you?
It's great to be here, David. Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to make it clear that the new book is out, and it's been published in England called "The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman." So I'd really encourage people to get that book, not the old one, because the new one's an updated version.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, it's a book that I've read myself, and I think it's a work which, if you understand the Confessions of an Economic Hitman, then you do understand the reason why there's poverty in this world.
Yeah, I think what I hope to do with both of these books is to point out how we've created a failed economic system globally, and we must change it, and we can change it. The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which just came out last week, really gets into strategies for how each and every one of us can change that system and the importance of doing so. It's something we absolutely have to do, David.
Absolutely, absolutely. So tonight I have a list of questions here, which have actually been written up by our colleague from CommonSpace, Scott, Michael Gray, who unfortunately is not able to join us tonight for technical reasons. So I'm going to conduct the interview myself. So John, just to get us started here, you set out your stories working as an economic hitman during the 1970s and 1980s. Can you just give our viewers just an overview and a synopsis of what your role was within the corporation, Charles T. Main?
Yeah, well, officially my title was chief economist. I had a staff of about 50 people working for me from time to time, but my job was to go out and identify countries that have resources our corporations covet, like oil, and arrange a huge loan to that country. But the money would never actually go to the country. Instead, it would go to our own corporations to build big infrastructure projects in that country, like power plants and industrial parks and highways, things that benefit a few wealthy families in that country, as well as our own corporations. And those are the main beneficiaries, the big corporations. But these things didn't help the majority of the people. They're too poor to buy electricity. Can't get jobs in industrial parks because they don't hire many people. And yet, they were left holding a huge debt. Ultimately, the country couldn't repay its debt. It tried. It took money out of the education system, the healthcare system to try to pay off the debt, but failed. And so we'd go back and say, hey, since you can't pay your debts, sell your resource, oil, whatever, cheap to our corporations without any environmental restrictions or social regulations, and privatize everything. Sell our corporations, your schools, your water and sewage systems, your electric utilities, your jails. Just privatize everything that had been public sector. And in that way, we really created a global corporate empire. It's not really an American empire, it's a corporate empire. And incidentally, in the few cases where we failed, where we could not convince leaders to accept these deals, and I write about how I failed in Ecuador and Panama, the leaders of those countries were then taken out by what we call jackals, people who overthrow governments or assassinate their leaders. Both Jaime Roldos of Ecuador and Omar Torrijos of Panama, two of my clients, and I counted them as friends, were assassinated because they didn't play the game.
Yeah, so essentially it's like an invisible economic empire, and it doesn't exist in name. It's not specifically called the United States. There's no agencies which are specifically called the CIA. Everything is some sort of a proxy. Yeah.
That's correct, David. I think it's fair to say that the CIA, the Pentagon, the NSA, these all basically work for these big corporations, for what I call the corporatocracy. This system is run by people who head up these corporations and often have major jobs in government for a short period of time, run Wall Street. They really control the world in a very big way. This isn't a conspiracy theory, incidentally. These people don't have to get together to conspire to do something illegal. They're just driven by the profit motive. They all belong to the same kind of closed club, if you will, and yet it's not really a conspiracy. If it were a conspiracy, it would be easier to get rid of. But we do have to get rid of it. We have to change this because they've actually created a failed system. We see that this global economy, which I call a death economy,
yeah,
is today failing all of us, and we must change it.
Okay. Now, Michael has asked, since you departed company with Charles Tiemann in the 80s, what has your journey been like since then?
Well, um, when I quit Charles C. Maine after 10 years as an economic hitman, I started to write a book to expose what I'd done, what was happening. And I contacted other economic hitmen and jackals. I telephoned them, and very, very quickly I got telephone calls myself, anonymous threats, people threatening my life and my young daughter. She was an infant at the time, her life. And then I was taken out to dinner by the chairman of the board of Stone & Webster, a big consulting firm in Boston that had been a major competitor of my company. And the chairman of the board said, you know, you've got a great resume. I'd been chief economist at one of his major rivals. And he said, we'd like to use your resume and proposals. You don't have to do any work for us. Just let us use your resume. I'm prepared to write you a check for $500,000 as a consultant's retainer. Just don't write the book. And so, David, it was, you know, a combination. I'm being threatened on the one hand, my daughter's life is being threatened, and I'm being offered a bribe. It's a legal bribe. What he was offering me was totally legal, but it was a bribe. And so I have to say, I took the money, instead of putting my daughter's life in danger. And in my own defense, I'd say that I didn't go out and buy a fancy car or big house or anything like that. I invested the money into going back to some of the countries I'd screwed as an economic hitman and offering to help the people there. Formed a couple of nonprofits, Dream Change and the Pachamama Alliance. You can go to those websites. So go to my website, johnperkins.org. That'll link you to all of those. And so I went back to these countries. I worked with people that I'd screwed, trying to help them. And I also wrote 5 books on those countries, on indigenous cultures, shape-shifting, the world is as you dream it, those sorts of books that were okay for me to write. But I didn't write the Economic Hitman book until after 9/11.
Okay. I'm just going to deviate slightly from Michael's questions. You did state, I think it was in 2015, that, quote, obviously, I don't believe the official story of 9/11. And may I just ask why, obviously?
Well, I think the official story is just too suspect, you know. Probably everybody's seen or read some of the reviews by architects and engineers that say that the buildings couldn't have fallen like that. I don't know about any of that, and I don't know who did 9/11, but I don't believe the official story. One of the things that bothers me the most is that the Pentagon ended up with a huge hole in it, and no major player, no general, nobody in the Pentagon, high officials or in the CIA lost their job. I mean, that's inconceivable to me that would happen. There's just too many fishy aspects to the story. And what we do know, although I don't know who was behind 9/11, I don't claim to have any inside information, but what we do know is that whoever is behind it, they managed to do what we were told Osama bin Laden wanted to do, which is basically destroy the U.S. Economy and attack our democracy, our freedom, create a police state here. Since 9/11, the United States has really become an oligarchy, and we weren't by no means a perfect democracy before then, but things have gotten much worse. The police state's gotten much bigger. The forces of the economic hitmen have expanded tremendously. So whoever caused 9/11, they succeeded in doing what we were told Osama bin Laden wanted to do.
And just go back to shopping, I believe was the instruction the day after.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. That's what our President Bush advised us to do. Just go shopping.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Support the corporatocracy. Support the
Okay. Okay. So we've got a question here relating to the World Bank, IMF, corporations, U.S. government. The anti-globalization movement is particularly critical of these. Now, we've got the Trans-Pacific Partnership affecting the US. We've got the TTIP, which is affecting the United States and Europe. These trade deals have been described as corporate power grabs. Just how dangerous are these new trade deals, TTIP and TTP?
Extremely dangerous. They are. They give big corporations sovereignty over other countries. They take away the sovereignty of these countries, and they are hugely beneficial to expanding the corporate empire, the corporatocracy, giving them more power more money, and that's exactly the opposite of what we need today. They will expand what I call the death economy, an economy based on ravaging the earth, destroying the resources upon which the economy depends. It can't continue. And so we need to stop these deals. And I think, they are symbolic. They are the follow-up to NAFTA, the North American Trade Agreement, and CAFTA, the Central American Trade Agreement. And we've seen what those two agreements did. They destroyed the economies of Central America and Mexico. They help big corporations. We claim in the United States we have an immigration problem, but that problem was really created by NAFTA and CAFTA by destroying the economies of those countries, the local economies, and creating a haven for big international corporations to exploit the people and resources of those parts of the world. TTIP and TPP will do the same thing on a much larger level if they get passed.
What strategy should we employ against the implementation of TTIP, which would affect us here in Europe? There is a referendum coming up on membership of the European Union. Would exiting the European Union be one step towards removing oneself from the TTIP stranglehold, or is the solution to work somehow within the construct of the European Union?
Well, I think the real answer is greater democratization. If the European Union can tolerate greater democratization within the Union and within the individual countries while maintaining perhaps a common currency and some very strong common standards, that would be a good thing. But I think what we all need to recognize is that the power base today rests in the big corporations. They're controlling the world. The president of my country, the United States, President Obama, is a very good example of that. He has not implemented many of the policies that he promised during his campaign. He's done some good things. I'm not trying to deny that. But what he's shown us is that once a person becomes president of the United States, he's beholden to the big corporations. He's beholden to Wall Street. To all the big Wall Street firms that he had to bring in to basically run his financial policies, which control most other policies. We have to recognize that our politicians, whether they're in Europe or in the United States, just don't have that much power. The big corporations have the power. They control the money and they control the power. But we also need to recognize that they're vulnerable. That they only exist and prosper because we buy from them or invest in them and tolerate their activities. And they are driven by a single goal, which is a relatively new goal that came about in the 1970s, of maximizing profits regardless of social and environmental costs. Before that, they had a little bit more Keynesian approach, which was much more oriented towards serving a public interest. We need to convince these corporations that they must move away from this goal of maximizing profits regardless of social and environmental costs. And we can do that. We, the people, we're the ones who can do it. The politicians can't do it because they're essentially owned by the corporations and they're very vulnerable.
Is there anything that we can learn from the current resistance to TTIP and corporatism?
Is there something we can learn? Say that again.
Sorry, I'm just reading the question here. Is there something that we can learn from the current resistance to their imposition, to corporatism, and to what can we learn from the resistance at this stage?
Well, I think what we're seeing today, David, and I've been the last 12 years since the first confessions came out until now when the new confessions came out, and now it's continuing even more. I've been on a globe-trotting speaking tour all over the world, China and Romania and England and Ireland and all over the United States and Latin America and the Middle East. So, and what I see everywhere I go is that people are really waking up. There's a consciousness revolution. People are understanding that we all live on a very fragile space station with no shuttles. We can't get off. We've got to fix it. And they're also beginning to understand that there really are no borders. These are all figments of human creation, and they've been legalized. But there's really no England. There's no China. There's no United States. I mean, there is. We've created these borders. But the fact of the matter is, from an objective standpoint, there's one planet, and it's in trouble. We're putting it in trouble. we need to break down these antagonisms and the temptation to always blame them. You know, the communists are the problem, the immigrants are the problem, the Muslims are the problem. The problem lies with us. We need to change this system, and we can learn from the resistance to TTP and TTIP, TPP and TTIP, and other movements. We can learn that they are effective. That if we strongly resist, things will change. When I was in college, there was apartheid in South Africa. We boycotted corporations that supported it, and it pretty much ended. The rivers in the United States were terribly polluted. We boycotted the corporations that were polluting them. They cleaned them up. This time after time, we see that when we stand up to these corporations, they have to change. And that's really where our leverage point is getting them to change and understanding that really, you know, they're run by human beings, many of whom have children and grandchildren, and realize that the world's in trouble. I talk to a lot of these executives. They get it. And even the sociopaths who don't care, if we let them know that the only way they're going to be successful is to change their policy. It's no more about maximizing profits. It's about making a decent rate of return for investors and serving a public interest, serving you and me and all of your listeners, serving all of our children, serving all species, in fact, and serving the earth, serving this living planet that we live on. We must get back to that kind of an attitude.
So moving away from what you're calling this death economy into something which is more sort of eco-cooperative.
Yes, I call it a life economy.
Okay.
And it's based on cleaning up pollution and helping starving people around the world. Half the world's population is starving or on the verge of starvation, helping them grow food more efficiently and store it and distribute it, creating new technologies that don't dig up the earth, that use what's already here, you know, that recycle and use the sun's energy and the wind's energy, not just in the ways that we're using it today. Photovoltaics are great, these wind machines are okay, but there's so much more we can do. It's creating new technologies for new forms of energy, communications, transportation, banking, everything. You know, imagine if we paid some of these big corporations that currently make missiles and tanks and body armor and destructive insecticides and chemicals that are hurting the earth. Imagine if instead we paid them to come up with systems and methodologies, tools for cleaning up the polluted oceans. I mean, there's huge islands out there of plastic in the middle of the Pacific. Let's mine it. Let's mine it, and let's recycle. Let's pay these companies to go about this in a new way. Create a life economy. I'm terribly excited about this because I think the opportunity is here, and it doesn't mean we've all got to go back and live in grass houses or something. We may want to change our lifestyles a little bit. That would be good. But more than anything, we just have to change our concept. What the indigenous people that I've spent a lot of my life with call the dream. How we dream the world. We've dreamed, we've accepted, we've bought into this death economy that says they are the problem. There's an enemy out there. We've got to build up a whole economy to defend ourselves from that. And the other thing is we've got to tear up the earth. We've got to keep mining and ravaging the earth. We've got to change that attitude, David. And that's a fairly quick thing we can do, and it's happening around the world. People are understanding that. Now we've got to take the appropriate actions.
So you see a technological a solution to the way in which we use energy for our own ends, and then in the same ways like the Zeitgeist movement proposes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think technology is part of it, but the main thing is a change of consciousness. Yeah. An attitude that says that, you know, there's two realities. There's this physical reality. There's the reality of this computer right now that I'm talking on. That's a physical reality. But then there's an imagined reality as to how we're going to use this computer. What are we going to talk about? So borders are an imagined reality. There's really nothing that separates England from France. I mean, yeah, there's a big body of water. But the real separation is psychological, and it always has been. You know, there's the Catholics and the Protestants, and there's these are psychological things. Religion is an imagined reality. Culture is an imagined reality. Borders are imagined realities. John Lennon had it really right when he said, imagine if there were no borders, imagine if there were no religions. We really need to understand that we imagine these things and then we codify them in laws and they become a reality that affects the objective reality. So we have this imagined reality of an economy that's based on ravaging the earth and warfare, opposing them, finding them and opposing them. We just need to change that mindset. As we change that mindset, we also apply technologies in new ways that are much more supportive of taking good care of this planet, of being not just sustainable, but also regenerative, regenerating destroyed environments and sustaining existing ones.
I believe that you actually teach shamanism. Can you tell us
Yes.
a little bit more about that?
Well, before I was an economic hitman, I spent 3 years in the Peace Corps in the Amazon and Andes. My life was saved by a shaman. I was dying of an illness that he cured me of, and then insisted that I become his apprentice. And then as I traveled around the world to places like Iran and Indonesia and Egypt and many other parts of the world, I studied with shamans in all of those places. And the thing that I learned from all of that is about mindset. So when I was dying and cured of that, basically the shaman changed my mindset. It's an interesting story. It's in the New Confessions of an Economic Hitman. But suggest that your readers, if they're interested in that story, get the book because the details are there. It's a fascinating story, actually, and it changed my life. And it taught me that basically so much of our lives is mindset. And it's fairly easy to change mindset. So I was cured of a disease I was dying of in one night by a shaman, basically by changing my ideas, my mindset toward food and drink that I was having there. And throughout life, I've seen this over and over and over. Every major revolution that's ever occurred in human beings, including the big ones like the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and the political revolutions, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, and so on. These were all impacted because people realized that they could change their attitudes, their mindset, the way they looked at the world. We're at one of those times now, and shamanism teaches us that that's a fairly easy thing to do. Mindset and then act according to the new mindset. And it also, incidentally, David, can be a lot of fun. We don't have to look at this as being an incredibly difficult thing to do. All we got to do is change that mindset and enjoy doing it. I have a lot of fun with spending my life inspiring, trying to inspire, trying to motivate, trying to empower people to change their mindsets. And from the emails I get, I'm sometimes fairly successful. We all have that ability. And social media gives us that ability so much more strongly these days.
Absolutely. It's a peer-to-peer connection, so there's no hierarchical structure when people do communicate on social media. It's fantastic.
It's very, very powerful. If for example, if you're upset with the fact that Nike hires people, slaves essentially, in its sweatshops in Indonesia, or Monsanto does things you don't like, or Walmart, organize a consumer campaign through Facebook, through Twitter, through emails. And if you get enough people to send emails to these companies and tell them that they've got to change or we're not going to support them any longer, either by buying from them or investing in them, when enough people do that, they'll change. They have to change. They recognize that in essence, the marketplace is a democracy if we will just choose to use it as such. But we have to actively use it. And the social media makes that so much more easier today than it's ever been before. And fun.
Yeah. And I believe McDonald's at the moment in the UK have moved over to using free-range eggs, basically just because of pressure from customers.
We've seen so much of that. Yeah. We've seen Walmart start to sell organic food, and McDonald's and so many corporations are giving in now. But we have to keep up the pressure. And now we have to say, the biggest thing of all is you've got to change your mindset from being one of maximizing profits, regardless of the social and environmental cost, to making a decent return for your investors. We need new technologies, as I've said. We need investors, but a decent return. But the main goal should be to serve us, to serve the public, to serve this earth that we live on, to serve all living creatures, and create a world that our children and grandchildren are going to thank us for.
Yeah. Do you mind, just before we go into the tough questions, can I ask, have you done ayahuasca?
Oh yes, in fact, I was trained as an ayahuasca shaman back then,
Oh, okay.
and that story also is in the book back years ago. And
Okay.
I take people to South American indigenous cultures 3 trips a year, one to Ecuador, one to Colombia, one to Guatemala, and on many of those trips, people have the opportunity to do ayahuasca. In fact, I'd invite all your listeners to come on one of these trips. Go to my website, johnperkins.org, and the trips are written up in there.
Yeah.
So come on, come with me. It's an amazing plan.
I think it was Graham Hancock that said that I'm not sure if it was him or if he was repeating somebody else's words, that any world leader, any leader of any country should have done ayahuasca at least 10 times. Would you agree with that?
Well, one time might be enough. I don't know about the 10 times, but and I also think, we have to be careful that we don't look at this plant as a panacea. I think that's sometimes dangerous that people say, oh, if only everybody would do ayahuasca, it would change the world. I've known indigenous people who've done ayahuasca and become very violent warriors, killers. I mean, it's not a panacea. Yes, it can open your mind to new realities. It can help you see beyond, but it can also become something that people begin to look at as a fetish. And I don't like to see that. So the indigenous people typically use it very cautiously and not that often. And I think it's something, again, something we need to be careful of. It's a great plant. I love it. I've had some amazing experiences on it. I've taken probably over 1,000 people through experiences on it. And I also have seen it abused in the United States. I've seen people become rather dependent, not necessarily addicted, not physically dependent, but they reach a point where they think they've got to do it often. And that's not the way the indigenous people look at it.
Okay, must be respected at all times. I understand. Okay,
Absolutely, yes.
okay. Now, Michael has asked. You've said that you want a reformed capitalist system, but one that doesn't have the same fixation on corporations and economic growth. But his question is, why not socialism?
Well,
why not socialism?
I believe in socialism, democratic socialism as a government form, but that's not opposed to capitalism. Capitalism simply means that the means of commerce and industry are controlled by private individuals, not controlled by not owned by private individuals, not owned by the government. Now, under socialism, the government has tremendous controls over these businesses, and I think that can be very, very good. And socialism then takes money from the corporations and gives more to people in terms of education, healthcare, and other social services. I'm all for that. But let's remember, capitalism has many different forms. And right now, the form that I object to is called what I call predatory capitalism. It's this huge corporate capitalism that is driven by this one goal of maximizing profits. The only goal, maximizing profits, regardless of social and environmental costs. That was not the goal I was taught in the late 60s in business school. That changed in the 70s when Milton Friedman won the Nobel Prize in Economics by saying that maximizing profits is the only goal. We need to get away from that. And we need to understand, the little markets of indigenous people around the world and farmers markets and local markets, those are forms of capitalism too. Simply means owned by individuals, by private people. The means of production are owned by private people. And not by the government. But this new form of predatory capitalism where big corporations control politics, that's really not capitalism. That's a form of oligarchy. It's a form where government doesn't own the business, but business owns the government. I don't like that. Let's move away from that.
Okay. Bernie Sanders, the Bernie Sanders movement is proposing a form of democratic socialism. At least that's how they describe it. Are you hopeful that there's going to be a shift in U.S. politics?
I love Bernie's many of Bernie's policies, and I think symbolically he's got something really important to say and get going. However, I also think it's really important for people around the world, and especially perhaps the U.S. voters, to understand that if Bernie does get in the White House, he's still going to be subject to a Congress that's manipulated by the big businesses. Even if a president isn't manipulated by the big businesses, the Congress is. There's over 100,000 lobbyists, about 13,000 of them registered, and another another 80,000 or so that don't register as lobbyists, but in fact are. So the pressures are huge. And we're hoodwinked here in the United States into believing that if we just vote for Obama or Bernie or Hillary or Trump or whoever we believe we ought to vote for, that's going to change everything. It won't, because the system is too big, it's too powerful, the corporations are too powerful, and we have to understand that it's we the people. You know, this show of 2 years of basically running for president is a show. It's a distraction, and people fall for it. So, yeah, I love what Bernie has to say. I would love to see him elected, but I'd hate to see that happen and have people get lethargic as they did after Obama was elected and just say, hey, he's the president, he can do it all. He can't. We've got to do it. We, the people, have to do it. Yeah. We have to change the corporations. We have to change this paradigm of the death economy and convert it to a life economy. We have to do it.
We have to feel the burn.
Yeah.
Okay. Scotland is likely to become an independent country. We're going to face challenges of international borrowing markets, corporate influence, military pressures. What advice would you give to those wishing to establish a new European state based on principles of equality, justice, and peace?
I love those principles. Yeah. Equality, justice, and peace. Who can argue with that? As to whether Scotland should become independent or not, I don't meddle in other countries' politics. I've got enough on my hands in my own. But I think the Scottish people should take a really good hard look at this. And certainly this debate in a way has been going on for a very, very long time. And it would be wonderful if Scotland does emerge as an independent country, if it followed those principles and set a new model for the world. That would be a wonderful thing to see happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's quite a realistic prospect that Scotland will become an independent country, whether it's within 5 years or a little more. But the fact is that the vision for a new Scotland is very much one which is goes against the NATO model of bombing campaigns in the Middle East, very much anti-nuclear, absolutely anti-nuclear weapons. We'd be moving NATO's nuclear arsenal out of the country. The fact is that there will be a resistance to this. So I suppose the question would really be, what kind of defence do we need to put up against the kind of manipulation from the military-industrial complex, from large corporations who would probably seek to politically interfere in some way with the project of a new Scotland?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question, David. And I think that the important thing is, if you set up a new government in Scotland as an independent country, make sure that there's no way that the big money can influence your politicians. Set it up unlike the United States, where big money cannot pay for political campaigns, cannot be involved, where people who have elected offices cannot go back and work for big corporations for a long period of time, maybe 5 years or whatever. That's a big problem in the United States, that you've got somebody who's a high executive in the oil company, comes out of the oil company, goes to Washington and runs the watchdog organization. Yep. We've just seen that with Goldman Sachs very strongly. People coming out of Wall Street, out of Goldman Sachs, to run the financial sector of the U.S. government today, of the White House, and then they'll go back to Goldman Sachs. And the temptation there for influence peddling, for bribery, for corruption, legal corruption is very strong. So I would really recommend that Scotland set up a system where that cannot happen, where there's total laws and rules and regulations and watchdog organizations that will not allow politicians to accept money from big corporations or large amounts of money from any individuals, and cannot come out of a business and then go into government and then go back to work for those businesses that they've been overseeing. That could be an incredibly important step, and it could be a great model to show to the United States and everyone else in the world. True democracy would be a wonderful thing to see happen.
Absolutely.
We certainly don't have it in the United States. Never have, really, but in recent years, it's taken a step even further backwards to oligarchy.
What about central banks? Should Scotland divorce itself from the Rothschild system? Should we control the money supply by printing our own money and remove ourselves from any fractional reserve system?
Yes, as an independent country, I think it's essential to be able to print your own money. We've seen what's happened to countries like Ecuador and Panama that can't do this. We've seen what's happened in the European Union. You know, it's part of the problem that Greece is going through right now. I've been in many conversations with Yanis, who was the former finance minister of Greece. He wrote a great endorsement for the new Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And that's one of the problems. An independent currency, I think, is essential. And to have control over it, and you surely do not want to set it up as the Federal Reserve model in the United States. It's a bad model.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to take a question here from one of our viewers. Alan Ferguson has asked, how do we influence the corporate media? Is it a case of voting with your feet, buy a newspaper or don't buy a newspaper? I mean, how effective can we actually be against this this machine, the propaganda machine that's corporate fed?
Well, to recognize first of all that that's exactly what it is—a propaganda machine, and not patronize it. I get my news from online servers, things like Democracy Now, Amy Goodman, and many other online servers. And there's a lot of good information out there through the internet. We have an opportunity with the internet. People can get some very good news on my website, johnperkins.org. Just you have to sign up for the newsletter once a month and a couple of blogs a month, and then on Facebook I put out something just about every day. And there's a lot of people doing that. So today it's relatively easy to get a lot of news. People say, well, can you trust the news on the internet? Well, can you trust the news in the newspapers? No, we know you can't do that. And some of the news on the internet, if you surf around and you follow things, you get a variety of opinions, and then you can make your own judgment. So I strongly encourage that. The mainstream media is entertainment at best and pure propaganda at worst.
Yeah, you have to be able to question the basis of knowledge. I think that's the principle when it comes to trust.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and we have to recognize that the mainstream media is in the business of creating this imagined reality that supports the corporatocracy, that supports the big global empires.
Okay. If there are any more questions from the viewers, we can take them now. I'll tell you what, why don't we speak a little bit more about the reissue of your book. So when was it released?
About a week ago.
Okay, and what kind of reception has it been getting?
Fantastic. I've been getting great reviews. I actually introduced it at a writers' conference in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, with about over 1,000 writers there, and got incredibly good reaction, standing ovation. We had 300-400 copies of the book there. They all sold out immediately. I've been getting great emails. The book, it really updates everything that's gone on since 2004 when the original Confessions came out. And really what that is updating us about what's happened since 9/11, which was a watershed moment in world history. There's no question about it. Things have changed, and they've gotten much worse. The economic hitman cancer has metastasized around the world.
Yeah.
More jackals, more economic hitmen. A year ago, we were told that 85 individuals have as many assets as half the world's population. 2 weeks ago, we were told it's now 62 individuals. It's gone from 85 to 62. Either way, it's pretty bad. We've got to change that. And so this new book is really about that, and it's a lot of new material, 15 completely new chapters, and then all the other chapters updated. And in the end, a strategy that each and every one of us can employ to turn this around. I actually have lists of things that students can do, things that retired people can do, things that entrepreneurs can do, things that house husbands and housewives can do. There's lists of things people can do. The important thing is for each of us to recognize that we have power. You, I, every one of your listeners has power. If you think of any hero, David, if your listeners, all of your listeners out there, I just would invite them to think of somebody that they consider a hero. Maybe it's Gandhi, maybe it's Winston Churchill, maybe it's Mother Teresa, maybe it's Florence Nightingale. Think of someone you consider a hero, and then consider that there was a point in their lives when they had no idea they were ever going to be a hero. They were just a normal person who starts out to do something having no idea that they're going to be successful. We're all in that position. Every single one of us has power. We just need to use it. And we need to follow our passions. You know, if you're a carpenter, you build things sustainably and you talk about it. If you're a dentist, you talk about making a life economy while you've got your fingers in somebody's mouth. You know, if you're a parent who spends the days taking care of your children, talk to your children about the importance of converting from a death to a life economy. Every one of us can play a role in this, and we should do it every single day.
Absolutely. Okay, well, unless there are any more questions from the viewers, why don't we just take, you can give us two of the things that we can do off of that list that you mentioned there, John. Two of the things that we can do to reverse this process.
Well, listen, so I've already said, I think the most important thing of all is to change corporations. And so when you shop, be very conscious, but it's not just enough to shop consciously. If you decide not to buy this pair of tennis shoes from this particular company because you don't think they're paying their workers enough money in Indonesia, send them an email and get all your friends to send emails. Organize consumer movements. Pick a corporation that you want to change and organize a consumer movement through Facebook, Twitter, emails. Every week, they send out an email and ask all your friends to send out emails or Facebook posts or Twitter's tweets, and to ask all their friends to do the same, and let these corporations know. That's important. Beyond that, I think every individual needs to look to his or her passion. What is it you most enjoy doing? You know, my passion is writing, so I write, and I go on shows like this. But everybody has a passion, but use that passion directed toward creating an environmentally sustainable and regenerative, socially just world, a life economy. If we all move in that direction continually and change the story from the death economy, from the failed system, from a story that tells us we don't have power to change it, to a story that tells us we do have the power and we will change it, we will create a life economy. You constantly work on changing that story however you want to do it, through music, through poetry, through politics, through playing tennis, through however you want to do it every day.
Okay, so I don't think we have anything else in from the viewers, so we'll draw things to a close. So, John, is there anything that you'd like to add to our discussion?
You know, David, I would just like to say that to all our listeners here and viewers, this is a phenomenal time. I believe we're going through the greatest revolution in the history of human beings, a consciousness revolution. And it's bigger than the industrial or agricultural revolutions. It's global, it's huge, and it's very, very important. And every one of us was born into this time because we have a role to play in that revolution. So I really encourage you to get out there and play your part. You know, get the new Confessions of an Economic Hitman. If you have any questions as to how to do it, the answers are in that book. But you may already know in any case. But do it every single day and feel how blessed you are to be able to do it. You know, I have to say, I'm angry and I'm sad by what's going on in the world and by what our corporations are doing. But rather than just struggling with that anger and tearing my hair out and being destructive or self-destructive, I have a great time with it. I'm enjoying this. You know, I enjoy writing the books. I enjoy talking to you. I enjoy going out on speaking tours. So it can be fun. It is fun. Changing the world is fun. Every one of your listeners and viewers is in a very blessed position to act every single day in whatever way is most appropriate to you individual, to do that. Act and enjoy it. Have fun. Know that we are going to change the world. We're going to make a world that future generations will thank us for.
Okay, John, that's absolutely wonderful. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in to watch. Sorry we were a little bit late. Thank you very much to Michael Gray, who couldn't join us tonight, but did supply a list of questions here for John. So for myself, David McGowran, in the KILTR.com office, in collaboration with independencelive.net. Peace.
Thank you. Thanks, David.
Just stay on the line there, John.